Yep, and I think I'm live. It's late on Thursday evening, and the events of today, like the events of the day before, are more or less the same. There are certain indicators which show that the trajectory we're on isn't going to lead in the near term to a happy future. Three things come to mind. Our elected officials know what our general feelings about the lockdown, and about the restrictions that are taking place in terms of travel, in terms of work, in terms of employment, and so on and so forth. And the elected officials, people who we voted for, are telling us that they're being led by scientific advice. Okay. The second thing is people's individual voices on the most accessible media for us all, which is social media, are being censored. If you say something that Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, or any of the other major social platforms that they don't like, if you say something these social platforms don't like, you'll either be sent to local prison, which is Facebook prison, for an unspecified period of time. And if they think, in their opinion, that your offense is truly egregious, you could get deplatformed. They'll just cancel your account. Okay. Then within the mainstream media, the big media, which carry the reputations acquired over decades, but for a couple of them, centuries, there is a confluence of the narrative that's being told, such that, for example, a huge demonstration which took place in London on the 29th of May got a couple of column inches in the newspapers, very little coverage, and the coverage was to say that the people were being rowdy. Well, I happened to be at that event. It was the most orderly protest that I'd ever seen in my life. So clearly the media is there to censor what's going on, so that the man on the street, if you weren't there, you would probably have got a narrative of people who were being completely irresponsible at a time when only a few people had been vaccinated. Okay. So the media is being willfully inaccurate and restricting the voices that are speaking. And the journalists, I have journalist friends who are telling me that they have been prevailed upon not to write what they know or broadcast what they know. Thirdly, when it comes to our politicians being led by the science, the medical censorship we're seeing at the moment is unbelievable. And it's not as if the people who are being censored are nutters. They're people with the highest credentials from the most prestigious institutions, just that their point of view has not been approved by whoever is running our affairs at this time. Now, of course, we know that even though we have elected politicians, somebody is working behind those politicians to make the politicians do what that somebody is. So for all of these reasons, one can absolutely reasonably suggest that we are heading towards a kind of totalitarian state in which individual liberties are at risk, in which freedom of speech is at risk. Indeed, we're heading towards something of a technocracy in which not all, but a few approved scientists are going to determine your future and mine. Now, what's the problem with that? The problem with that is that if you took a cursory glance at the social media and the chit-chat between us all as people, you would know that we were actually in the greatest social crisis since the declaration of World War II. You wouldn't know it. Because social media, having censored out any kind of sensible conversation or a lot of sensible conversation, focuses on the most trivial, the most happenstance events of our daily lives, which do not address the sword of Damocles hanging over all of our heads. Brings to mind that French queen, who was Marie Antoinette. It is said that when people were saying that the poor of her country couldn't afford bread to eat, she thought to herself, let them eat cake. If you can't find bread, then go and find cake. She actually was talking about something called brioche, which is a kind of bread which is enriched hugely by butter and eggs. So it's a form of, I mean, in the minds of the English, it's a kind of cake, really. So that's a little bit like saying to people who don't have, let's say, meat to eat, well, you can't find meat to eat, well, why don't you eat caviar? You know, a real high-end food. And whether or not she said it, it was meant to show the disdain of people of a certain background, of a certain class, to the very real sufferings of ordinary people. Now, of course, she got her head cut off for that kind of insensitivity. But I can't help bringing this to mind when I look at what's going on now in social media. If I was an alien who just piloted myself into planet Earth, I wouldn't know that planet Earth was facing the greatest existential threat to its accustomed way of being in a lifetime. So, the last time this sort of thing happened, the way it affected me, do you remember when George Floyd was killed? And that film of the policeman kneeling on his neck for over 9 minutes went around. It felt as if, when I saw it, I thought I was watching, I couldn't watch it for all 9 minutes, it was too much. But it felt like watching a snuff movie. And for those of you who don't know what a snuff movie is a movie in which murders are filmed live, because it's the most accurate representation of taking human life, far better than anything you could ever act. So you kill the people live on camera, and it's filmed. Of course, they are completely, utterly disgusting and despicable and rightfully completely illegal. But when we watched a snuff movie of George Floyd being killed live before our very eyes, what it did to me was so, it was so heartfelt that I remember thinking that, you know, when I went to work on a Monday, everybody was behaving as if, well, actually nothing has happened. And I thought to myself, so my white friends, my friends of European background, expect me to have lived through that experience a few days before and to rock up to work and pretend as if nothing has happened. And that's literally what happened. Most companies, actually, the staff in most companies went to great odds not to mention it, because in the UK, the majority of people in most companies would be people of European origin, aka white, and they probably wouldn't know how to address the matter, even if they wanted to. Anyway, net result was everybody pretended as if nothing had happened. Well, that's how it feels now. You go on social media. What's changed? So that's the equivalent of telling people to let them eat cake. Does it make sense to you? Now, the truth is, we are in trouble. And one of the observations I make is that the group of people who were so smug, so arrogant, so full of themselves, so believing that the world was created in their image and that they were the ones who naturally ran everything, that would be the middle classes, mostly white Anglo-Saxon Protestant middle class people. This smug, entitled, very self-servingly superior bunch are sitting there with nothing to do or say while their rights are daily eroded away. Now, you would have thought by their behavior, profile, attitude, and manner before that they'd be the ones who would be mounting the barricades and saying, Mr. Johnson, we can't have you treating us like that. We want our rights back, and so on and so forth. They are mute. Absolutely and spectacularly mute. Which tells you something else. That actually, despite the puffed up self-importance of we the middle classes, somebody else is running our lives. And that somebody else are big businesses, huge businesses, in this time particularly large pharmaceutical companies are running our lives. And because everything runs on the lubrication of money, the banks are running our lives. And because no man is an island and we communicate with each other on a daily and constant basis, it's all enabled by a media that has been pulled to heel and is being used as a propaganda mouthpiece for whoever is running our lives at the moment, which we know is not the middle class. In fact, the middle classes are among those who are being the most muted. But you don't have to try very hard because the middle classes are so busy with maintaining their reputation that they're not even saying a word to be humiliated in public. So that's the state of play right now. Social media, the media, is being used as the opiate to drug and dumb down the public into a stupor which enables them to navigate the circumstances we're in at the moment. And the more it dumbs you down, the more it takes you down with trivia, the more it numbs your mind. Of course, the less you are able to mount or to engage, to trigger the very resource you need most in a time of crisis, which is your self-awareness, your self-identity, and your sense of engagement with your environment. The social media and the media are trying to make you escape into a fantasy world over here, whereas actually the solution to your problems lie firmly over there. And these observations are things that I can't help but make. I personally, I'm not saying that it's all over. It's not all over. Because there are very few of these titans who control our lives. All it takes is a woke individual or two, and this whole thing can be completely righted. This ship, which is slowly capsizing, can be perfectly righted and all the water pumped out in a nanosecond, but not while they're taking the attitude, let them eat cake. Not while their mentality is being dumped down with their collusion by focusing on trivia when they should be talking about important things. This is a thought. Now, I'm not saying for a moment, let's not become a bunch of glums and all sit there and complain and so on and so on. No, that's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is we must be able to remark with honesty on our circumstances, not fake it to everybody that, ooh, isn't life still glamorous? Or, ooh, aren't I still having, because you're not, everybody knows you're not having fun. You can't have fun when your liberties are being stolen away from you on a daily basis and maintained in that status. We all know you're lying. So the point is, a little bit of honesty will take us out of the spiral into mental numbness, which is the very, very stuff of which our rapid demise is made of. Worth thought. Have a good night.